Welcome back. All right, so we're just in the preseason. We haven't started the regular season yet, but it's always fun to speculate. Today I want to speculate about which team is most likely to finish 32nd overall and end up with the best chance at getting the number one draft pick this year. And so what I've got on the board here is, and these are in an order, my power rankings currently have Arizona at 32, Chicago at 31, Montreal at 30, and Philadelphia at 29. Now, the records from last year, well, 61 points for Philadelphia, a 25, 46, and 11 record. They've hired John Tortorella. That means we're going to get a lot of entertainment this year. Montreal, 22, 49, and 11, 55 points. Worst season potentially in team history, well, depending on how you look at it. And really, this is a team now that's gone into a rebuild, and they've said it. So is Chicago. 68 points for them, 28, 42, and 12. But basically, they've had a fire sale, and that fire sale likely continues this year. For Arizona, 25, 50, and 7, 57 points. They finished 2 points ahead of Montreal, and somehow didn't end up finishing with the worst overall record. So for Arizona, is this the year? We'll see. So I am wearing a Roadrunners jersey, which of course is the AHL affiliate of the Arizona Coyotes, right here. So I'm guessing it's going to be Arizona. But let's go ahead and take a look. So I've got top six forwards, defense, and goaltending. Now, top six forwards, by ice time, there are different players who end up in top. And again, this obviously isn't set in stone. It's just an approximation of who's probably your top six for these teams. So for Philadelphia's top six, they've got Lawton, Hayes, Atkinson, Van Riemsdyk, Farabee, Konechny. Without Couturier, they lack that depth down the middle, right? And so that's a problem. And for Couturier, he's out for probably a few weeks into the season, right? So we'll see what happens there. Couturier is a very important player to Philadelphia. If he comes back sooner, maybe it helps him out a little bit. Again, I don't have them in the same category as these guys, but I was thinking about it this morning because I was just going to do these three teams, and I thought, no, Philadelphia could still be pretty bad. So Philadelphia needs to be on this board. On the blue line, they've got Provorov, D'Angelo, Sanheim, Ristolainen, Seeler, and Braun. And of course, Ellis is in brackets here because he's not playing. And that is a huge impact on this blue line. A lot of this is going to depend on whether or not D'Angelo can play just as well for them as he did for Carolina last year. He had a pretty remarkably good season for Carolina, and so he'll be looking to follow that up by doing the same with Philadelphia. Again, with D'Angelo on the ice and Tortorella behind the bench, this might be the most watchable team that's bad in the National Hockey League. In net, well, we haven't seen Carter Hart yet. Hart should be back for the start of the season, shouldn't be a problem. But then the backup position to me is still up in the air. So you've got Hart as the starter. Then you've got Sandstrom, Ersson, and Grosnick have all had action in the preseason. And honestly, statistically, Ersson's been pretty good. So I'm not saying he necessarily gets it, but he's been pretty good. So for Philadelphia, it's a bad picture. Is it as bad as Montreal's? Montreal's top six, Caulfield, Suzuki, Hoffman, Drouin. I've got Dvorak in there and Anderson. I don't have Slafkovsky making the team and getting top 6 minutes, but could it happen? Sure. On the blue line, Matheson, Savard, Schoenemann, Weidman, Harris, Barron, and of course Edmondson is currently on IR. I like Schoenemann, but should he be in the top 4? Probably not. I think Justin Barron probably ends up in the top 4. We'll see how it all shakes down, right? Matheson's a decent defender. I think he's underrated on some level. I know his contract would tell you he might be a little bit overpaid, but I think that leads to players being underrated too. I think you can be both overpaid and underrated, where people just criticize the contract and they forget he's a pretty good player. Then in net, you've got Allen and Montembeault, and of course, Carey Price. We don't know if Carey Price is going to play again. Much the same as Ryan Ellis. He might be done in the National Hockey League altogether. So that's a huge blow to the Montreal Canadiens, who relied on Price quite heavily for a long portion of his career. And now, I mean, Jake Allen's a good goaltender, but it's not Carey Price, right? So that's something they're dealing with. And of course, they've already said that they're in a rebuild. I'll get to the draft picks part too once I'm through all 4 teams. On the Chicago side, up front, you've got, I think Athanasiou ends up getting a lot of minutes, at least to start, right? Taves, Kane, of course, are going to get minutes. Kurashev, Domi, Radish. Does Domi get that second line center spot? He may very well. And so if you have that top 6, honestly, you can tell they've torn things down, right? On the blue line, both Caleb and Seth Jones on that blue line. Jack Johnson, Connor Murphy, Riley Stillman, and Regula in there as well. And so, I mean, the blue line is actually probably not as bad as people are going to make it out to be. I think this could be a decent blue line. Is it a playoff blue line? No, that's not what decent means. Decent just means, well, they weren't that bad tonight. That was pretty good. That's where I'm at here. The goaltending is the question mark, right? Mrazek's looked okay in preseason. Stalock's had a good game here and there, but Soderblom, I think, has pushed himself into the conversation, and so we'll see whether or not Stalock sticks around or if they go with Soderblom. We know that Stalock can clear waivers. He's done it before in his career, so if they decided to do that and go with Soderblom as the backup, and I'm just saying that just for why not, right? Just for the sake of, sure, why not? And of course, their coach, Luke Richardson, might be the one difference maker here too. Luke Richardson's made it clear that he doesn't intend to lose all his games. He's going to coach these guys to win. And no matter what kind of dog's breakfast he is handed, he is going to try to turn it into at least something that can win, right? So you may get more wins out of Chicago than you expect because of Luke Richardson behind the bench, much like Andre Tourigny with Arizona. How's that for a segue? So for Arizona, up front, I actually think they're okay. I mean, not again. This is you're comparing between these four teams. Not going to compare them to Colorado or something like that. Keller, Schmaltz, Boyd. I know Boyd being in the top six is a head scratcher, but look at his points last year. He played pretty well for them. Krause, Hayton, and Fisher. And again, Hayton had a good game last night. Had 3 points. Andrew Ladd might get top 6 minutes if he were able to play, but he's on LTIR, so. And I only say might because Arizona has got a roster where Cassian may end up in this top 6, right? But by ice time from last year, Fisher played more than Cassian, so I thought, yeah, I'll put Fisher in here, but it could end up being Cassian, which again is not a ringing endorsement for the fantastic depth of the Arizona Coyotes, though Cassian can be useful at times. On the blue line, you've got Gostisbehere, Mayo. Mayo's underrated, Arizona, of course. People don't pay as much attention, but both Mayo and Mosier. Mosier was pretty good last year. Timmins, if he's healthy and can stay healthy, that's a bonus. And they got Nemeth and Stetcher, and of course Chychrun, who currently is listed as IR, but I don't think he's supposed to miss a lot of time this year before he comes back. Honestly, Arizona's defense isn't awful. It's not bad. It really isn't that bad. That third pairing of Nemeth and Stetcher, it's not, again, comparatively speaking with some of the others on the board, it's not bad. And then in net, you've got Vejmelka, you've got Johansson, and you've got Prosvetov. Johansson was picked up on waivers, but does he stay, right? Because Johansson's bounced around the league. And while he's collecting jerseys from different organizations, he does tend to bounce around a lot. So I would not be surprised to see Johansson necessarily end up on the waiver wire, especially if Prosvetov outplays him. Unless Arizona just says, Prosvetov doesn't need waivers, we'll keep Johansson and Vejmelka and let Prosvetov develop in the minors, which is very possible. Quite possible. So when we look at these teams, we say, okay, so which ones are really rebuilding? Well, Philadelphia doesn't have 2 firsts this year, but they have 2 firsts in 2024. 2 firsts this year, which is 2023, meaning this season, for Montreal. 2 firsts in 2023 for Chicago as well, although the Tampa Bay pick they have is top 10 protected, meaning if it was a top 10 pick, it shifts to 2024. Not likely. And then with Arizona, they only have 8 picks in 2023. They don't have an extra first rounder, but they have 14 picks in 2024. So this is a team that's planning ahead. And so the expectation is if you're just looking at who's the most rebuildingest team, it's a word, don't look it up. But the most rebuildingest team to me would be Arizona. The team that seems to be bound and determined to make this rebuild work by getting the top prospects and giving guys time to develop and making sure you have as many draft picks as possible. And the way that I always describe it is, really the draft is like a lottery in and of itself. You're drafting kids who are 18 years of age, maybe 19. You might be taking a chance on an overager. You're betting on what they're going to be when they're 25 and older. You're betting on what they're going to become. And it's not an exact science. So while there's a lot of criticism of this team or that team that they're drafting, the reality is that every team has misses, every team has hits. And if you have more picks, you have a better chance of getting more hits. So I would imagine Arizona's going to get more draft picks this year. And maybe if they trade out Chychrun, that would make some sense. because you do have 6 NHL defensemen here without Chychrun in the lineup. So it's possible Chychrun does get moved, right? Or maybe they look to move somebody else. Ghost Bear, I believe he's in the final year of his contract as well. Maybe they'll look to move Ghost. I was actually kind of surprised they didn't last year because he was producing pretty well throughout the season. He had a great bounce back year. I think his contract looks fine when he's producing like that. So we'll see if he's still there. I don't think Philadelphia is going to be as bad as the other teams. But again, I think it's going to be entertaining. I don't think they're going to be a playoff team. But I think that in the case of Montreal, Chicago, and Arizona, these teams have unofficially declared themselves as the teams tanking for Bedard. Keeping in mind that you've also got Fantilli and Michkov in this draft. If these guys get the top 3 draft picks, it doesn't matter which order, all of them will come out of this year's draft with a pretty good draft pick. Keeping in mind, of course, we've got a long time till the 2023 draft for another prospect or two to jump up and get a top 3 spot. And so, yeah, this could be a very interesting season. My guess is that the worst team in the league should be Arizona, but they should have been the worst team last year, and it looked like they would be. And then Montreal said, "No, we'll do it." And Chicago is doing their best, again, tearing the goaltending down, and the forward group they have, and again, Taves and Kane on expiring contracts, not expected to finish the season there. Yeah, this could be a two-way race here between these two, because I think Marty St. Louis, with the offense that he can coach, I think Montreal can win more games than either Chicago or Arizona. I would think they can win more, and Montreal may end up winning more than Philadelphia, depending on how things go for the Flyers and the experiments that they brought in behind the bench with John Tortorella, on the ice with Tony DeAngelo, and in net deciding that it's Carter Hart, and we'll see how the backup position works out, right? But yeah, let me know your thoughts. Who do you think is the worst team in the National Hockey League this season, right? Is it Arizona? Is it Chicago? Is it Montreal? Or is it Philly? Or is it somebody else? Let me take a quick look at the power rankings board. No, I don't think Seattle belongs in this conversation. And I thought about putting Seattle up here, and I thought, no, Seattle's done a lot of good in the offseason. So while they finished behind Philadelphia and Chicago in points, I think Seattle's going to be better this year. But let me know your thoughts on that as well. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And again, I thought this would be fun. Just take a look and say, hey, which team might be the worst? And again, I don't think it's a bad thing because it is intentional by 3 of the 4 teams on the board. But let me know your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.